Having a driver's license means independence and freedom to many people and is something a lot of us take for granted. Getting to work, doing the shopping, or just visiting friends suddenly becomes complicated, even impossible, for those who have lost their ability to drive through injury or illness. However, many people, despite their disabilities, have regained their licenses and their independence with the aid of the Driving Rehabilitation Centre. In 1988, the Driving Rehabilitation Centre was established to offer services to people with special driving needs. The centre is located at Cumberland College of Health Sciences, which is part of the University of Sydney. The centre's staff include occupational therapists qualified in driver assessment and driving instructors experienced in training clients with special needs. Clerical support is also provided. The centre's aims are to provide consultation services in the areas of rehabilitation programs for those who have problems driving, provide education and training for personnel working with disabled drivers, to research driving and driving dysfunction, provide supporting associated resource material, and promote safety awareness for all motor vehicle drivers and riders. The Driving Rehabilitation Centre has concentrated on establishing specialised services to the community. These include the Driving Rehabilitation Program, defensive driving for people with disabilities, refresher driving courses, research and development, and information services which are provided on a nationwide basis. The centre utilises a team approach. Each member contributes significantly to program development. The team consists of the client, the client's family, a medical officer, an occupational therapist, a driving instructor, a vehicle modifier, the Roads and Traffic Authority, and other consultants if required. The Driver Rehabilitation Program is open to people with any disability who have been given the required Roads and Traffic Authority medical clearance. The first stage of the program is the 2-hour off-road assessment. This covers screening of physical function, vision, cognitive and perceptual skills, and general road rule understanding. This is completed in the Driving Rehabilitation Centre by an occupational therapist qualified in driver assessment and training. The off-road assessment is intended to allow for prediction of dysfunction during the on-road assessment. Next, a 1-hour on-road assessment is carried out by the occupational therapist with the assistance of the driving instructor. The centre has 3 vehicles available for assessments: a modified Ford Falcon, a modified van, and a manual car. The on-road assessment is designed to allow for detection of problems with the activity of driving. The occupational therapist, on conclusion of the assessment, provides recommendations and feedback to the client and involved members of the team regarding the person's fitness to drive. Depending on the nature of the disability and the person's previous driving experience, several lessons and assessments may be required. At the conclusion of the program, clients may need to have their licence officially endorsed by the Roads and Traffic Authority. They may also be required to attend an RTA disability driving test. Greg Buckley suffered a severe head injury during a football match in August 1988.
When I realised that I'd lost my licence and I couldn't drive again, I was shattered because it ruined my independence. It was like cutting my hands off. It was just not good. That caused a lot of problems for me when I initially realised that it sort of was another nail in the coffin. I thought, well, here we go. What more could go wrong?
Greg Buckley is a 22-year-old who was referred to the Driving Rehabilitation Centre by his occupational therapist from the hospital. Greg sustained a closed head injury after a football accident 8 months prior to the referral. Greg attended the Centre for the Driving Rehabilitation Program. The first stage is the off-road assessment. During this, a physical, cognitive, perceptual and visual screen is done. Greg was found to have decreased function in his left side. In his upper limb he was found to have poor coordination and increased tone. In his lower limb he had increased tone and poor hip and knee control. In the visual screen it was noted that Greg was having problems with his eyesight. He was then referred on to an orthoptist for a specialist report. In that report he was cleared for driving.
The results of the off-road assessment recommended a car with automatic transmission and the use of hand controls. In this instance, a right spinner knob.
Greg then went on to the next stage, which was the on-road assessment.
Get comfortable and we'll get going. Okay.
Greg drove the centre's automatic car, which has power steering.
How's the spinner feel? Yeah, it's a bit hard to get used to, just holding onto something that's a bit free.
That's right. But after a while, it becomes second nature to you.
Greg came back for 4 lessons to learn to use the spinner knob. After the 4th lesson, we reassessed him and it was decided that Greg was ready to sit for a disability test with the RTA. He sat for the test and passed and had his licence endorsed to be driving an automatic car with a steering aid. Greg now enjoys driving with a current driver's licence.
David Lamond is a 67-year-old man who had his right leg amputated above the knee.
Not being able to drive after 17 years made things very limited for me in the sense that it wasn't easy to get out and I became very dependent on other people to take me out and about and of course having to depend on public transport was a bit of a problem too because I couldn't walk terribly far and with the result, as I said, one feels a bit of a prisoner in one's own domain.
David Lamond was referred to the driving rehab centre by his son following a right above knee amputation. During the off-road assessment, it was noted that Dave was using a wheelchair when mobilising long distances and he was starting to use a right above knee prosthesis plus a walking stick for mobilising short distances. There were no other physical abnormalities detected during the off-road assessment. As it is unacceptable to use an artificial leg on the brake and accelerator pedals, it was discussed with David at this stage that he'll be needing to use a left foot accelerator, that is, an accelerator positioned to the left-hand side of the brake. The next stage was the on-road assessment. It is a 1-hour drive in quiet local streets. The occupational therapist sits in the back seat and observes the client, checking their eyes that they are scanning the road appropriately, checking the way they are using the modification, and noting the way they respond to traffic and traffic conditions. At completion of the on-road assessment, the occupational therapist, driving instructor and Dave discussed the results of the assessment. Dave was given feedback. It was suggested at that stage that he may require between 5 to 10 lessons to allow him the opportunity to familiarise himself with the brake and the accelerator in their correct positions. At completion of 5 driving lessons, it was suggested to Dave that he was ready to attend his RTA disability test, as he was now fully confident with using the left foot accelerator. Dave passed his RTA disability test and now has his licence endorsed appropriately. He has since had his own car modified and is now driving about independently.
Margaret Free is a 47-year-old woman who was recently diagnosed with motor neurone disease.
If I had to sum it up in a sentence, I'd say that losing my licence and not being able to drive was a loss of my independence. It meant that I had to depend on my family or my friends for so many of the things that I've always taken for granted that I could do.
Margaret was referred to the Driving Rehabilitation Centre by her occupational therapist in the community. When Margaret attended the program in early 1991, it was found in the off-road assessment that she had reduced motor coordination in her lower limbs, mainly in her right leg. It was then felt that she should drive using hand controls, which meant that she should drive using the brake and accelerator with her hands as opposed to normal foot controls. During the on-road assessment, Margaret was initially very nervous using the controls and had difficulty coordinating the hand controls and the use of the spinner knob.
Cars here?
That's right. Straight ahead we go.
The lesson stage of the program is extremely important, especially in Margaret's case, because she actually had to learn to change her dominance from using her feet to control brake and accelerator to actually using her hands. So a series of 5 lessons was recommended prior to the Roads and Traffic Authority disability test. It is now great to see Margaret driving with the new hand control and spinner knob, which she's had modified to her own vehicle, and successfully gain her endorsed driver's licence with the Roads and Traffic Authority. She now has the freedom to continue driving independently.
Well, now that I'm driving again, I can do everything I would have done before. I'm a free agent. I've got my independence back and I'm on wheels, as it were, and very happy.
The Driving Rehabilitation Centre at the University of Sydney Cumberland College of Health Sciences strives to achieve greater independence and freedom for those who have lost the ability to drive. Working together to achieve these aims, the Driving Rehabilitation team sees many members of our community successfully back on the road.